Thousands of perfectly healthy seeds die every single day before they ever have a chance to sprout. Not because they were old, not because they lacked sunlight, not because they were planted too deep. They die because of a mistake that happens exactly 10 seconds before planting. A mistake so common that almost every beginner repeats it without realizing it. The strangest part is that farmers have known the solution for generations. It requires no gadgets, no expensive moisture meter, no laboratory testing kit. Just your hand, one squeeze, 10 seconds. And it can tell you whether your soil is about to grow food or quietly destroy every seed you place inside it. Once you learn this simple test, you will never plant another seed blindly again. Think back to the last time you planted a packet of seeds. You carefully prepared the bed. You spaced everything correctly. You covered each seed with fresh soil. Then you watered exactly as the instructions recommended. Days passed. Nothing happened. Maybe 1 or 2 weak seedlings appeared. The rest simply vanished. You blamed poor quality seeds. You blamed cold weather. You blamed birds, insects, or bad luck. So you bought another packet and repeated the entire process. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it failed again. Gardening started feeling unpredictable, almost random, as though success depended more on luck than skill. But nature does not work that way. Seeds are astonishingly intelligent biological machines. Inside every tiny shell sits a living embryo carrying enough stored energy to begin building an entirely new plant. Yet that embryo follows strict biological rules. It will not wake until the surrounding environment tells it survival is possible. Temperature matters, oxygen matters, moisture matters, and one hidden factor quietly controls all three. And the structure of the soil itself. Today, here on Roots Insider, we are uncovering one of the oldest field tests ever used by experienced growers. A technique so simple it almost sounds too ordinary to matter. Yet this tiny habit prevents countless planting failures before they ever begin. Long before digital moisture sensors existed, long before scientific laboratories analyzed soil composition, farmers trusted something remarkably accurate. They squeezed the soil in their hand. That simple motion revealed information impossible to see with your eyes alone. Because soil is far more than dirt. Healthy soil is an underground city. It contains solid mineral particles, microscopic air pockets, water films, fungal networks, bacteria, decaying organic matter, and billions of invisible organisms working together every second. When these components remain balanced, seeds awaken into an environment rich with oxygen, moisture, and biological activity. When that balance collapses, germination slows or stops completely. Most gardeners only notice the surface. The seed experiences the entire underground world. Imagine placing a newborn baby into a room with no air circulation. The temperature might be perfect. Food might be available. But without oxygen, survival becomes impossible. Seeds experience something surprisingly similar. Before roots emerge, oxygen must move freely through the surrounding soil. If the soil becomes packed too tightly, air disappears. Germination slows dramatically. Harmful microbes begin multiplying. Tiny roots struggle to penetrate the dense environment. Now imagine the opposite. Dry, dusty soil crumbles instantly between your fingers. Air exists everywhere, but moisture barely remains long enough for the seed to absorb what it needs. The embryo begins waking, then immediately experiences drought stress. Growth stalls before it truly begins. Successful germination lives between these two extremes, not too wet, not too dry, not compacted, not powdery. Finding that balance is exactly what the squeeze test reveals. Take a handful of planting soil and close your fist firmly for several seconds. Then slowly open your hand. Watch carefully. If water drips between your fingers, the soil contains far too much moisture. The air spaces have filled with water. Seeds placed into this environment risk oxygen deprivation before they even sprout. If the soil remains a hard, solid lump that refuses to break apart with gentle pressure, compaction is too high. Water may be present, but airflow has disappeared. Roots will struggle the moment they emerge. If the soil instantly falls apart like dry sand before you even release your grip, moisture levels remain far too low for reliable germination. The seed may absorb enough water to begin activation, only to dry out before completing the process. But if the soil briefly holds its shape, then gently crumbles apart with the lightest touch of your finger, something remarkable has happened. The moisture level has reached what soil scientists often describe as ideal field capacity. This is the hidden sweet spot. Water surrounds each soil particle without flooding the air spaces between them. The seed receives moisture. The roots receive oxygen. The microorganisms remain active. Everything begins working together. That tiny crumble tells an enormous biological story. To understand why this works so reliably, we need to look beneath the microscope. Every soil particle behaves like a miniature storage system. Clay particles hold enormous amounts of water because their surface area is incredibly large. Sandy particles drain quickly because they contain much larger spaces between them. Organic matter acts like a sponge, absorbing water while slowly releasing it back into the surrounding environment. Healthy garden soil combines all three components into a remarkably stable structure. When you perform the squeeze test, you are actually measuring how these microscopic relationships are functioning together. You are not simply feeling moisture. You are evaluating structure. Professional farmers often describe good soil as feeling alive. That phrase is more scientific than it sounds. Healthy soil aggregates form tiny clusters, held together by fungal threads, bacterial glues, root exudates, and decomposed organic matter. Between those aggregates remain thousands of microscopic pores. Some store water, others store oxygen. Together they create the environment every seed hopes to encounter. Destroy that structure, and planting success drops dramatically. Protect it, and germination becomes astonishingly consistent. This explains why two gardens sitting side by side can produce completely different results despite receiving identical seeds, identical sunlight, and identical rainfall. The difference often exists beneath the surface. One gardener prepared the soil. The other only prepared the bed. Now let us expose one of the biggest misconceptions in modern gardening. Many people believe watering after planting fixes everything. It doesn't. Water cannot permanently repair damaged soil structure. If heavy watering compresses the surface into a dense crust, tiny seedlings may never possess enough strength to break through. They germinate successfully underground, then exhaust all stored energy pushing against hardened soil before ever reaching sunlight. The gardener never sees the failure. They simply assume the seeds never sprouted. In reality, they did. They just never escaped. That tiny difference changes everything. Because now planting becomes less about following seed packet instructions and more about building an environment where life can actually begin. And every successful environment starts with one question: what is my soil telling me before I plant? The squeeze test answers that question in 10 seconds. It transforms guesswork into observation. It replaces habit with biology. And before this video ends, you will discover why experienced growers trust this ancient test even when modern moisture meters tell them something completely different. Now let us go deeper, because the squeeze test does something even more valuable than measuring moisture. It predicts what your roots will experience during their most vulnerable hours. The first 48 hours after planting determine more about a plant's future than most gardeners realize. During this short window, the seed absorbs water, activates dormant enzymes, begins converting stored starches into energy, and pushes out its very first root. That tiny white root, called the radicle, is incredibly delicate. It has no backup system, no stored reserves beyond the seed itself. If it encounters compacted soil, oxygen starvation, or rapidly changing moisture, the entire process stops. The plant never gets a second chance. Scientists call this imbibition, the first stage of germination. During imbibition, the seed rapidly absorbs water, sometimes increasing its weight by more than 50%. But this process only succeeds if moisture remains consistent. If the surrounding soil swings between soaking wet and bone dry, the embryo experiences severe physiological stress. Cell membranes rupture. Enzyme activity slows. Some seeds recover. Many never do. Anaphoreka, this explains why gardeners often see uneven germination from the same packet. The seeds were genetically identical. Their environment was not. That is why experienced growers never rush planting after watering. They wait, they test, they squeeze the soil again. They understand that planting into freshly soaked ground often creates worse conditions than waiting another day. Excess water fills the microscopic air pockets between soil particles. Oxygen disappears. Beneficial microbes slow down while harmful organisms gain an advantage. A seed surrounded by water but deprived of oxygen faces the same biological problem as a fish removed from water. The resource it needs exists all around it, yet it cannot use it properly. Now let us talk about something almost nobody discusses. Soil is constantly changing. A garden that passed the squeeze test yesterday may fail it today. Wind removes surface moisture. Afternoon heat accelerates evaporation. Heavy rainfall compresses the upper layer. Organic matter absorbs and releases water throughout the day. Soil is a living system, not a fixed material. That is why successful gardeners trust observation more than calendars. Instead of watering every Tuesday or planting every Saturday, they respond to what the soil is actually telling them in that moment. You think about baking bread. A skilled baker does not simply follow a timer. They touch the dough. They observe its texture. They understand that humidity, temperature, and flour quality change every batch. Gardening works the same way. The squeeze test transforms planting from following instructions into reading living conditions. That small habit separates mechanical gardening from biological gardening. Now let us examine why soil texture changes everything. Sandy soils drain rapidly because the particles are large and leave wide spaces between them. Water moves through quickly, but nutrients often wash away with it. Clay soils behave almost opposite. Their particles are microscopic and packed tightly together. They hold water extremely well, but often struggle with aeration. Loamy soil sits beautifully between these extremes. It balances water retention with oxygen availability, making it ideal for germination. The squeeze test works across all three types because it measures balance rather than simply moisture. Imagine squeezing beach sand. It falls apart immediately. Imagine squeezing wet clay. It sticks together like modeling putty. Healthy garden soil behaves differently. It briefly forms a soft ball, then gently crumbles when disturbed. That crumble tells you air still exists inside the structure. It tells you roots will have pathways to follow. It tells you microorganisms remain active rather than suffocated. Those tiny clues are invisible until you train your hands to recognize them. Professional growers sometimes say they can judge a field with their fingertips. That statement sounds romantic until you understand the science behind it. Human skin contains thousands of pressure receptors capable of detecting incredibly small changes in texture and resistance. Long before digital moisture sensors existed, experienced farmers developed astonishing accuracy simply by handling soil every day. Modern research continues proving what generations already understood. Physical observation often reveals information instruments cannot fully capture because it combines moisture, structure, compaction, and organic matter into one immediate assessment. There is another hidden advantage to the squeeze test. It prevents overwatering before it begins. One of the most expensive mistakes in home gardening is watering according to habit instead of need. A gardener walks outside every evening, hose in hand, assuming plants always require more water. Eventually, the soil never receives time to breathe. Air spaces remain flooded. Roots become shallow because moisture always sits near the surface. The plant grows dependent instead of resilient. But when gardeners begin squeezing the soil first, watering becomes intentional. Sometimes the test says water today. Sometimes it says wait until tomorrow. That single decision gradually builds healthier root systems capable of surviving heat, drought, and environmental stress. Now let us expose another common myth. Many people believe adding more compost automatically fixes poor soil. Compost is incredibly valuable, But even the best compost cannot overcome severe compaction if it is mixed improperly. Imagine pouring premium fuel into an engine with no oxygen intake. The fuel quality no longer matters. Combustion still fails. Soil behaves similarly. Organic matter performs best when combined with good structure. The squeeze test immediately reveals whether that structure exists. Compost improves biology. Structure protects biology. Both must work together. This principle becomes especially important in raised beds. Many gardeners assume raised beds automatically eliminate soil problems because they drain better than traditional gardens. They certainly help, but raised beds can still become compacted over time. Heavy rainfall, repeated foot traffic, and years of settling gradually reduce pore space. A raised bed filled with dense, compacted soil can struggle almost as much as poor ground soil. The squeeze test works there too. It reminds you that elevation alone does not guarantee healthy structure. Now let us perform one simple experiment. Take soil from 3 locations, one from a healthy vegetable bed, one from a heavily walked pathway, one from an unopened bag of commercial potting mix. Wet each sample until evenly moist. Perform the squeeze test on all 3. The differences become immediately obvious. The pathway soil often forms a dense, stubborn lump. The potting mix may crumble too quickly because of its lightweight materials. The healthy garden soil usually creates that perfect balance between cohesion and crumble. Your hands begin learning what textbooks struggle to explain. Once you experience that difference, gardening becomes much easier. You stop guessing. You stop chasing symptoms. Instead, you evaluate the environment before problems begin. Every successful harvest starts underground, long before leaves appear, long before flowers bloom, long before fruit develops. Healthy soil quietly determines the future. There is a reason regenerative farmers spend more time discussing soil than seeds. Seeds carry potential. Soil determines whether that potential survives. A premium heirloom variety planted into poor conditions often performs worse than an ordinary variety planted into exceptional soil. The squeeze test reminds us that preparation almost always beats correction. Fixing mistakes after planting requires time, money, and luck. Preventing those mistakes requires only 10 seconds. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson hidden inside this simple habit. Nature constantly provides feedback. We simply forget to listen. Soil speaks through texture. Leaves speak through color. Roots speak through growth. Moisture speaks through structure. Gardening becomes dramatically easier when observation replaces assumption. The most productive gardens rarely belong to people with the most expensive equipment. They belong to people who pay attention. People who notice small changes before they become large problems. People who understand that successful growing begins long before the seed enters the ground. Every thriving harvest starts with a healthy environment, and every healthy environment begins with understanding the soil beneath your fingertips. So before you plant another packet of seeds, stop for 10 seconds. Scoop up a handful of soil. Close your fist. Let the soil answer the question before the seed ever has to. If it crumbles gently, you have created an environment where life is ready to begin. If it does not, adjust the soil first. The seed deserves that chance. If this simple test changed how you think about planting, tell me in the comments whether you have ever checked your soil by hand before sowing seeds, or if today is the first time hearing about it. I read every comment because your questions often become future investigations here on Roots Insider. And if you enjoy uncovering practical gardening methods hidden behind simple biological principles, subscribe to Roots Insider. The next technique looks even simpler than this one, yet it can dramatically improve germination speed using nothing more than an everyday household item almost everyone already owns.